So the mind begins, Libi to you my heart says, seek my face, and concludes as Panecha Avakesh, your face, O Hashem, I seek. So the figure brings from Rashi two Pirushim. In the words, Omar Libi. The first one is that my heart acts as your agent. So the pshat in the pasuk is, L'cho, on your behalf, Omar Libi, my heart says, Bakshupan, I seek my face. So who's speaking? Bakshupan is a quotation of the Eibishter that the heart is saying. In Hashem Shlichus, the pasuk concludes, the Melech continues, and that's what I'm doing. I'm listening to my heart, and I'm seeking your face. That's Pashat Pshat level 1. Pashat Pshat level 2, Bimkoimcha. Bimkoimcha, the subtle difference is in your stead. It's not as if Hashem is to charge the heart to say it. The heart spontaneously is saying it. You have to tell it. It says, in your stead, Bakshupona. Clear? The two Pirushim. I hope that while we're listening to it, since we learned the whole Maimer, we are already associating the answer, which we actually did yesterday in the chart that we did. We linked all of the Pirushim up on the chart that it can be seen readily, which we posted on the chat as well, Thursday. So then, if the Maimer continues, likewise, there's two Pirushim in Bakshu. Request or examine. Then the Fidig Rebbe explains that these two inyonim, now he just zeroes in on the bakasha component, that these two inyonim, to examine, to request, are in davening. Number one, davening is bakasha, is request. What's the request? He puts the two together. The request is that a person should be matzliach in his self-examination. And that is connected to the union of Bakshu, L'choma Libi Bakshupana. So Avodas HaTfilah, which is expressed in the word Bakshu, is associated with Libi, because Tfilah is the service of the heart. Then he adds that in Libi Gufa, and it all ties up in the end, it all matches, there's two levels of Libi, two levels of Avodah. In the heart, in other words, the Avodah is the heart itself, not as a means to something else. And imalev, with the heart, that the heart is used to extend further and examine all the manifestations of a person's being. So the Rebbe says that these two pirushim of the heart itself, or with the heart, accord to the two pirushim in Bakasha. When it's a request, then what's the request? The request is that my heart be revealed. That's b'seich halev, not with the heart, but the heart itself. Chipus, the examination component of davening, is the avodah with the heart. The avodah is to take the heart and then its essential connection and see that guides and governs every other aspect of his manifested being. So that is al yedei or im halev. Okay, so that's kind of an outline. Much more to come, obviously, but the Maimon proceeds from here to explain this. Now here's where I want to, I'm going to pause a bit and be happy if you can fill in the gaps. Whether you're here, whether you're present physically or online, happy to hear you fill the gaps as we review the Maimon. So you have to follow along the text as we're proceeding. So to understand this, the Fidig Rebbe in his Maimer, the Maimer of Tovshin Aleph. So in his Maimer, he brings the pasuk of Psari Achzalakan, and we see later in the Maimer, who can tell me now, the difference between the Fidig Rebbe's Pirush and the Pirush of the Alter Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab.
of the Rebbe, the body is almost like a muscle for Likus, for Shloshah and so on. So through the structure of the Seichel Midas, etc., we understand the Likus, we understand the Likus.
Moreover, the Alter Rebbe's Pirush in Ipsori is the nefesh that's in the basar.
Yeah, the structure, the Seichel Midas.
Yeah, right.
The Rebbe Shabbat.
The Rebbe Rashab says that you look at the Gufa Gashmi, don't look at the Goyim, but recognize that the Gufa Gashmi is created from Atzmos and Mahus. Perik Lamed Hein Tanya the Ha'ara, quoted endlessly by the Rebbe, that Yesh Ma'ayin is only Mekerech Atzmos, which is true of every Davar Gashmi. So that's even higher in the sense it's even a deeper Pirush because it's pointing to Atzmos, not to the Spheres. But it's lesser. Why is it less? It's more, but it's less. No, the Rebbe Rashab's vote. That's why it's even less than the Alter Rebbe, and certainly the Frierdiker Rebbe, from perspective of our Maimer. Why is it saying less? I'm not saying less, but what mile is it not expressing at all? When you look at the Guf Gashmi, you recognize that it comes, as I just said, Mekerech Atzmos, it's true of every Davar Gashmi. Start looking at this Guf Gashmi, its properties and tchunas, that tells you that's expressive of Likus, its existence. Yesh Ma'ayin. Any Yesh Ma'ayin is the same thing. It's further away from the Pnimius, which is the whole point of the Maimer at the end, to bring out, and it's the Avodah Pnimius that draws on the Etzem deeper than the Avodah of Yechid itself. It's the whole point of the Maimer. The whole point of Chassidus, for that matter. And the Frierdiker Rebbe's Taichis Mipsari Achzalika is
They're not looking at the Guf Gashmi, but the Guf Gashmi and Nefesh Bahamas itself recognize the Likus by seeing the
Ashgacha Pratis, right? Telling stories of divine providence and seeing that, living with that. That's Mipsari, that's the new Taich, not in the flesh or where the flesh comes from, but the flesh itself, the body itself. So it goes into say over here. So Ice Base now, third line. Good. Moishe, you have the text?
Yeah.
So in seeing these two things, which we're talking about now, these intellectual seeing, that's what the Alter Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab speak of. There's Riyah Mukhshis, there's actual seeing. We're talking intellectual seeing, that's a Ruchnizik thing. And tangibly seeing is a guf thing. He goes on to say this, and this distinction is the way you look at the thing, because everything has a guf and a nefesh. A davar gashmi is a nefesh, and a davar ruchni is a guf. So, are you looking at the nefesh component or the guf component? Right now, we understand this very clear, much clearer. In hindsight, having learned the end of the Maimer. So therefore, look at the third line, therefore, the Frierdiker Rebbe stresses here, we are not talking about the Sichlis, not seeing the nefesh within the guf, but we mean this literally. There's inyonim, pratis, that a person can see with the physical eye, it's a physical story. Somebody went and came and encountered, and again, that's the mile of the businessman. The Mittel Rebbe said that the businessman sees that the Yeshiv Oil, he sees Ashgacha Pratis in the Sefer. He's told it's Ashgacha Pratis. Doesn't encounter too much the true Yeshiv Oil because he's in the world of Ruchnias. But that most of us, all of us, to one degree or another, are out there. So the Maila is this Mipsori Achsalakan, that's the Kavanah Pnimius, is to see a Likus. Not through, within the Guf, but the Maisa Begashmi is a Maisa Eliki. And then this I don't know why the Rebbe brings this, because interestingly, I'm saying at the end of his base, he brings from the second chapter of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer. There, in explaining Psari Echzalika, it talks about the Keichas and Nefesh Adam, the Mishtalisha from the Sviras Shalamayla. And therefore, from Al Nefesh, you can understand this Sfiris from L'mayla. That's the Alter Rebbe's taich. So it could be just wants to contrast it with that. There is that taich, but he is stressing the Mipsodi Iriya Mukhshis. You follow? It's not clear why he brings that, since his emphasis is not that Pirush. It may be the contrast. But Tzorich Iyun, because the Rebbe brings it here, it could be again the same answer to contrast. It's not the Pirush. Okay. Continuing now in our Pashut line by line, but not in the text. So it continues in the Maimer. Now this is what Perek Dalet of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer. This is what he referred to later in the Maimer. I just make this connection. He says that in order that the midas be aroused, there has to be achanda. Even though the achanda is bananus, which is a statement. Remember he said later in the Maimer. Okay, we'll get to it. So usually, what's the achanda? The achanda is meditation. Actually, I suggested this with the Pirush, not realizing the Maimer. I said, okay, anyway, I'm talking to myself here. Let's continue. So normally the achana is the isbonenus. That's the isbonenus, the reflecting on the Eibishter's greatness and so on. That is the achana to stir the heart. He says that's not enough. There has to be achana that talks directly to the heart, not just the isbonenus. And what is that? That's the merirus. The embitteredness before davening that a person has to reflect on. That's called achana mitzad halev. What's he reflect? It's not the Eibishter's greatness. It's his matziv. He's misbeinen, and the whole reason Hashem came down is for an aliyah. And to tell the mitzvahs, to should come to a higher dargah. Okay, it's coming clearer now. So then he thinks that's the game plan. But what's the pearl? Not only is he not doing to the mitzvahs as he should, so therefore he's not being pearl the aliyah in the neshama as it should be. But moreover, his unsavory behavior, he dragged the neshama down even further, even lower. Especially in his mizbein, and he brings from the Alter Rebbe in Tanya that an aveda is taking the head of the king and thrusting it into excrement. So, and even if it's for a moment, the Alter Rebbe goes into say over there, because right away he stops sitting, but does that change for at all the great what's the affront to the king's honor, even if it's only for a second? So this is this reflection, which is a hard thing, because it talks to the person and his matzav rather than the greatness of the Eibishter. So this is pale maridas, and that's the achana. In other words, he's saying the achana for davening is to be honest. We're not. If there's not going to be this honesty with our matzav, so the whole thing is based on fantasy. The whole is bonus. It's not a fantasy. The Eibishter is true. What you're thinking about is true. But my connection to it is somewhat of a fantasy. I have to bring me to the table, and that's how it has to start. I know it's interesting, he doesn't bring the Gemara. Rashi's Pirush Chassidus always quotes that a person should daven mitoich. Yeah. Rashi actually says the word, not mistaken, merirus. Certainly Chassidus does. It's interesting that he doesn't bring it here. Akol panim. So he ends the mind with a very nice imagery that this is, you want to sow a seed, you want to break up the earth first to plow it. So this is the chidisha. So now the person is, the kavanah is not depression, chas v'shalom. The kavanah is now to open up and be ready for the heart to open up and to have a real expression of the heart. So that's the achana mitzad halev. Okay, so later in the Maimer, what did the Rebbe explain here? There's a gewaldige diuk here in bringing out, again, the whole consistent bottom line chiddush of the Maimer is that the avodah with the midas, mipsari, with the guf, is pale and aliyah even in the transcendent levels and draws on the etzem in a deeper way. So later he said in avodah that when Moishe, it's not only that Moishe is a mocker for midas, but Moichin is fundamentally higher. When he says the Moichin does its thing, and it's not just intellectual, he has everything clear in his head. But when he brings it down to his midas, it actually deepens the Moichin, and that's why he added Nida Achona even mitzad alev. That was the Vata he said later. Nida Achona, even mitzad alev itself, before the Moichin kicks in, because the lev contributes to the Moichin. And the avodah with the lev ultimately draws on a deeper level than the Moichin does. Even though it's the isbonenus, even though it's the mocker of it, etc. Okay, we'll see that in the Maimon later, but let's bear this in mind, because that's why he's bringing it here now, and that's how he's going to explain it later.
I think the healthy avodah in the lev without the
No. He's saying that's not simply that the Moichin is pale in the lev. The Gamarno, the Moichin being pale in the lev, pale is an aliyah in the Moichin. And that's why before the Moichin begins, you have to have the Yisayris Halev, because the emissaries that the Maim explains, the Yisayris Halev, the Chetzonius, and get the midas, and engaging the person's matzav over here. And this is the emissary mipsori. That's pale and aliyah in the melech, in the bucket, all of the levels that he later lays out. That pale is aliyah in the likus, in sevev, in all of these levels have the true aliyah in dafke avodah pnimis. That's the word. So it's not just the moichin is here, the lev is here, and that's the job of the moichin, is to stir the heart. When the moichin stirs the heart and gets engaged in that avodah, there's an aliyah in the moichin, aliyah in the mocker. Right, the consistent theme at the end of the Maimon. At the end of the Maimon, as we explained yesterday, it's worthwhile hearing yesterday's shir, that the Melech Basoda pales an aliyah in the way the Heichel Malchusay. The whole Giloi that there is in Heichel Malchusay is a gewaltige aliyah be'in aroich that happens that because the Melech was Basoda. Lagabi the Melech, and certainly Lagabi the that goes with him. That their experience of the Melech, B'Heichel Malchusay, is radically different because they connected to him by Sod. Well, that's the Atzmitik connection and Mitzad the Melech, and they bring that to the Heichel Malchusay, notwithstanding the Giluyim, despite the Giluyim, or better said, in the Giluyim they see Melech. Right, as we explained yesterday. Continuing in the Chazorah, bottom of 309. So that the Rebbe is mamshech that all this is year round, especially Chedesh Elul, because Chedesh Elul is galus to give him the Serachim, even to the most distant, like in the Mashal of Melech Basoda. This is now critical, because the whole end of the Mayim is Masbor doesn't mean Melech Basoda. Now, the Rebbe has the square brackets, a very important thing. After explaining his Makabal Kulam, Seder Panim Yofis, and Bada Panim Shechet Kisle Kulam, he says, right, let's go to the square brackets, that even though the Maimon speaks about that the Avodah of Elul comes behemshech to the Avodah of Meriyus, nonetheless, it's important to appreciate that since Elul is a Gimel Sarachamim, and even to the Rechoikim, and therefore this is an appropriate time for the Chedisha, for the plowing, through Meriyus. But this Gil has to pale Simcha. Because since there's the Gimel Tzarachim ben Izgala, and the Melech is showing a smiling face, so this has to be Me'orer, K'mayim Ponim L'Ponim, the taste of Simcha in the Avodah of the Melech. It will not let us to remain or wallow in Meriyus, and it's there as a foundation, but then it has to translate in Simcha, knowing that the Melech is standing there and showing his love to you. Okay, Simcha with tears, but Simcha. So the Maimer concludes, and this is the end of the summary of the Maimer, as it were, in the salient points that the Rebbe threads through, and is Megala the Chidush Nifla in the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, brought to light in the Rebbe's Maimer. So he concludes there that the first pirush of L'chom Libi as your proxy, as your agent. So that's the shlichus of the person to make this world a dira, starting with his own self, his own heart, his own guf. And the pirush b'mkoimcha, in your stead, that is the Gila Yechida, which the Rebbe explains further at length. The Etzem, Atzmus, Nekudas Alev, that every Yid has, that is bound up and bound with Atzmus. Okay, Ois Gimel, the explanation, which we've already started to talk about, having done the Maimer already. So to understand deeper the two perushim ilacha, shlichus b'mkoimcha, and as we've done already now, again with hindsight, the connection to all of the inyonim explained in the Maimer. Let's look at the square brackets now. This has to be crystal clear. Number one, the dik of b'sariach salaka. And in order that there should be a this, it has to be a hachana, the merirus. We have to preface the following. That is the word of the Magid, the name of Baal Shem Tov, and that every word of davening, there's three dimensions. Eilam is neshamas nelikus. So likewise, in Bakshu Ponai, the Eibush says Bakshu Ponai. So either the neshama is saying it b'shlichus b'mkeimai. So where it is Bakshu Ponai, this is in Tefillah, Libi, the whole heart, which is Avodah Tefillah, Avodah Shebelev. So there's these three levels. So this word Pondai, this Gimel Pirushim. Okay, there's three levels. These three levels, namely, Eilam is Neshamas Nalikus. Statement number one. Then he says, in the word Pondai, in this pasuk, there's three Pirushim. We've already encountered two. Rashi's Pirush, L'chom Libi, that the Eibush is speaking, that the neshama, the heart, is speaking the Eibush shlichus, Eibim Koimai, or his place. That is true. That's the second pirush. So Bakshu Pondai, at the end of the day, these words Bakshu Pondai, according to both pirushim of Rashi, who's saying it? The Eibush. That's a primus elikus. Now, for the first time, he brings down the Rebbe's pirush. 3 lines in the bottom of 310. That's actually the neshama speaking, because this is based on the word of the Magid and the Baal Shem Tov, that every pasuk, every word actually has these three levels, not just neshama, not just alikus and elamus and dargis, but the Yid is speaking. So here Bakshu Pondai is Pnimius Alev, his own Pnimius Alev. The premise of the shamas. Oh, so pardon?
His previous Alev is talking.
Seek my previous Alev. The Yid is saying.
To the Eibush.
Yeah. Not just what has to correct something. He combined the first two pirushim of Rashi as one, because it is one pirush. They're subtly different, but it's quoting, speaking in God's name, one way or another. So Hashem is saying Bakshu Pondai. So here's the three Purushim of the Magid. Rashi is expressing the Elikus dimension in the words Bakshu Pondai, whose face? Eibush's face. The Alter Rebbe is bringing the Pirush that goes on the Shamas. The Yid is speaking. The eighth Pirush, Bakshu Pondai, goes on Atzilus. That's Eilamus. So these are the three dimensions mentioned by, just if Atzilus is speaking, or if not Atzilus is speaking, referring to Atzilus, a third narrator. Why is Atzilus Pondai? Because he doesn't know. It goes on to say that the four Eilamus are the four dimensions of Pnim, inner, external, right and left, and that's the Dalad Eilamus, and he spells out for us in square brackets 311 what's what. That the hinder level is obviously Asiya, The left is Yitzira, the Yamin is Bria, and Pnim is Atzilus. So Bakshul Ponai is Atzilus Pnim is Oilimus. Now comes the Rebbe's Chidush, and that is Daled. Folks, we're following along, yes? Yeah?
Yeah.
So in the Indian of, there's no substitute for learning it yourself again and again, but it'll be helpful. So in the Indian of Panai now, he says on all three levels. And then he answered, if you recall, who can tell me is if a fourth level? He spoke about it in the course, he introduced kind of a fourth sub-level. I mean, and that also translates in the neshama level as well. Now, I want to say that now, or you'll defer your comment. Plead the fifth. All right. We'll see it over the next page. So in all three levels of neshama in the course of the Eilim is bechlal two levels. So there's pnimius and there's pnimius of pnimius. Or, in the words of the Maamar, pnimius that is already as a shaychus the chitzonius, is a mocker, if not an intimate direct mocker, like a slapshus, an indirect mocker, hutzivah v'nivro, right? Still a mocker. And then this pnimius that's completely removed from chitzonius, the essential inner state, relatively speaking. Now, what are these two levels? And all three inyanim of neshamas and of elikus, Eilumas and neshamas. So start with Eilumas. The pnimius of Eilumas we said already. Yeah, pnimius of Eilumas is Atzilus. But the pnimius within the pnimius, because Atzilus is a mocker. It's an Eilam. It's a mocker for Biyah. It's like removed. There's a tremendous symptom between Atzilus and Biyah. Atzilus is Tahirahi. But nonetheless, it's ultimately a mocker. So that is a pnimius, which is shaychus to chitzonius. And then there's l'maylim atzilus, that's the pnimius within the pnimius. And he brings the Tzemach Tzedek, who says, on this pasuk, Bakshu Panai, this is the Eibusha speaking, and it's Panecha Vayavakesh, that Bakshu Panai that's pnimius, that's chokhmah, that's atzilus. Panecha Vaya, that's the pnimius of Shema Vaya, Arechaнаtik. So that is, in other words, L'maylim Atzilus. That's the pnimius of Havaya. Havaya Stam being Atzilus, dominated by Chochmah, as he goes on to say. Between Atzilus and Haya and Atzilus is part of Dalad Eilumas. It's the pnim, but it's a pnim shaykh to Chitzonius. But L'maylim Atzilus is moved from Chitzonius altogether. That's with respect to what? Eilumas. Now he's going to talk about Pnimius Alev. Yeah? We're good? We have to finish soon because we must start down on time now. I'm actually, if you guys are okay, I'd like to start 6:15. Another 5 minutes and it's precious time to sleep. Trust me, every second lying in bed is an eternity. But we have to finish like 5 to 7, 7 with the story. We're already now what? Almost 5 to 7. To start the story 5 to 7. Okay, so let's begin now. The Pnimius, and we'll continue the Chazara tomorrow. Be'ezer Hashem Yisborach. So Pnimius Alev is two dargis. The language of the Maamar, Ha'aris Nekudas Alev, and Atzmos Nekudas Alev. And these two levels are from Atzilus. And that's, therefore, therein lies the distinction, because Neshama becomes Matzilus. That lies the distinction between Chitzonius and Pnimius Alev. That Chitzonius Alev is to Biyah, in a way that means the Midas, and Pnimius Alev is Atzilus. That's why Chitzonius Alev is an Aveda Pitam Vedas, And Pnimius Alev is higher than Tam B'das. Because Bri is Asoga, is Bina, Eim Mekanah B'Kusaya, the mother rests in her nest. That's referring to Elam HaBriya, the mother meaning Briya, the nest is Briya, the mother meaning Bina, the nest is Briya, and Atzilus is Bes Chochma and Bittel, and Atlamalim Nasech. So this is all what? This is the Stam Pnimius Alev. Because as he goes into qualify it now, quantify it. However, we're talking, how does Nekudas Alev, Me'atzilus B'Pnimius B'Yah. This again is Atzilus as it relates to B'Yah, or the Pnimius of B'Yah, it's source Atzilus. But Atzilus Nekudas Alev is Atzilus itself. And just like above, that Atzilus as it relates to B'Yah is only Ha'ara, likewise, this low level of Pnimius Alev, it's only Ha'ara's Nekudas Alev. So it comes out, the Ha'ara's Nekudas Alev is that part of the heart that emanates outward to the Chitzonius Alev. Like Atzilus, the lower level of Atzilus, Atzilus Dam, illuminates B'Yah. And Atzilus Nekudas Alev is where the heart is in its very place. Now he's going to introduce the next ois. A fourth subtle level, which really adds a whole new dimension.